Iran by bicycle.
Before I get started, has anybody here been to Iran? A couple of people from Iran originally, so welcome. Anybody also curious who in here enjoys doing bicycle tours and has taken their bicycles somewhere else and done a tour at a different place? Okay, a couple of people. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and why Iran. I'll share the journey with you and also ask some questions, answer some questions and some questions related to how to do a bicycle tour like that. I enjoy doing bicycle tours. I'm a bicycle enthusiast. In fact, 3 years ago I sold my car and I don't even have a car anymore. And I've done tours overseas, including in South America, in India, Tajikistan, Africa, and other countries. Since 2013, I have a folding bike. It's a Bike Friday. As you can see here, it fits into a suitcase. Does anybody here own a folding bike? All right. So the beauty of a folding bike is you can just fold it up, put it in a suitcase, and then you can check it in as normal luggage. You don't pay any extra fee. It takes about 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes to put it into the suitcase and take it out. Why Iran? This is from the website of the Department of State. And they don't really advise that a US citizen go to Iran. They say arbitrary arrest and detention of US citizen is something that can happen to you. So some people were very concerned when I said I would go to Iran. Why did I want to go there in the first place? Because in Tajikistan, when I rode my bicycle there in 2016, I met a couple of young French people who had ridden their bicycle all the way from France to Central Asia. And I asked, what was your favorite country? Without hesitation, they said, Iran. So that caught my interest, and I asked, why? And they said, the people. They are amazing. And they went on and on and on about the hospitality of the Iranian people. And that's when I said, well, I really want to go to Iran. Also, I'm a German citizen as well as a US citizen. I have 2 passports. I grew up in Germany, northern Germany, Hamburg. I've been in the United States since 2001, so almost 20 years. I'm a dual citizen since 2013, so I have 2 passports. So for Iran, as a German citizen, I used my German passport. US citizens who don't have another citizenship are more restricted in traveling to Iran. And my understanding is they cannot travel individually in order to be part of a group. I flew from the United States via Vienna, Austria, to Tehran, and I did not have a visa. They allow that you apply for a visa, a so-called e-visa, online. And I looked into that and did not do that because you can also get a visa on arrival. The challenge for me was that while I'm a German citizen, I'm also a US citizen. So it's like, I didn't know, are they going to view me as a German citizen or a US citizen? Obviously, I live in the United States, I work in the United States, so somebody might just ask, are you a US citizen? Question mark. So I thought if I do the paperwork online, somebody in their office is going to take a thorough look at this and might just click deny. So I kind of did a lot of research online. I asked people on internet forums and then concluded I'll just show up and apply for my visa on arrival. I was somewhat concerned about whether it would work or not. I work at the University of Michigan at the Office of Technology Transfer. We work with faculty from all over campus. And the week before I went to Iran, there was a faculty in our office from Iran, and he was very concerned they wouldn't let me in. So I showed up and went to a window. A person about 60 years old was doing the paperwork, and he gave me a form to fill out. And I was prepared to obviously write everything on this form, including that I live in the United States. I would not lie about anything like that. To my complete surprise, the form was just this size. It was like not even a dollar bill size, and they didn't even ask where I lived. They asked where I would stay in Tehran, and I had a place lined up, and that was about it. So it was extremely easy. It took less than 20 minutes. It cost 75 euros, so about $80, and I knew that. And it was very smooth, and I was in Iran, so that was very good. I took a taxi from the airport to Tehran. It's pretty far out, actually. It's quite a ride. And I touched on hospitality of the Iranian people. The taxi driver stopped in the middle of the highway and went to his trunk, got his tea out, and offered me a tea in the taxi. I felt like, wow, this is amazing. This is very nice. So that was great first impression of the Iranian people and their hospitality. This is my first impression from Tehran, and as you can see, a lot of traffic. It's a city with over 15 million people, and it's a lot of cars there. Traffic is it's a lot. And shortly after I arrived, I went to the place where I would stay. I unpacked and then stepped outside, and within a minute, boom, literally, an accident. So I thought the highest risk of going to Iran, I thought would be actually traffic. Because there are a lot of roadside fatalities in Iran. Iranian drivers drive fast, let's put it that way. So within a few minutes, I saw the first accident, and I ultimately decided to not ride my bicycle in Tehran. Normally, I would ride my bicycle in the city where I arrived to just check it out. And the place where I stayed, initially one person said, oh yeah, you should check it out. And then I was like, no, this is just not safe. So no bicycle riding in Iran. I actually stayed in a hostel. I traveled by myself. So what I like about staying in a hostel is I meet other people and other travelers and can compare. No, it's a great hostel, the Heritage Hostel in Tehran. Had a great time there. I was there 3 nights. And I was like, surprised that they drink Coca-Cola in Iran. I didn't expect that. It's like, well, it's a piece of capitalism, isn't it? It's just like, wow, this is USA. And people love soft drinks, and they love Coca-Cola products in Iran. And that caught my attention. So this is a bookstore in Tehran. I was also surprised about some of the books they advertise, including The Art of the Deal by our very president. So it's like, wow, that is also very interesting. Didn't really fit my picture of Iran. Apparently, they do have the ability to sell and buy books written in the United States. I thought it was kind of cool. Also, what I see, there are some problems that people have anywhere in the world. They are fundamental to being human, regardless of Iran or Germany or the United States. So people are struggling with some of the same fundamental problems. One thing I needed to do, that's something you always have to do when you travel to a foreign country, is get local currency. One thing about Iran is you cannot use a foreign ATM card. Like most countries, you just use your ATM card and get cash out of a cash machine, but that does not work in Iran. So you have to get all the money you need in cash and carry it in cash all the time. I had a friend from Germany who was thinking about joining me for the trip, and that was a concern he had. It's like, wow, she said, I don't feel comfortable carrying all my cash, and people know that foreigners carry all their cash. It's one of the concerns he had, and ultimately he didn't join. So this is the currency, and the currency of Iran is dropped like a rock. It was just in free fall when I was there. So I got for $1 US about 100,000 of the local currency. And that was the exchange rate. I exchanged 250 US dollars for about 2 weeks. And see, well, let's see how this goes. So not a whole lot, $250 for 2 weeks. So 14 days, that's not even $20 per day. How much do you think I needed for 2 weeks? What's your estimate? $40 a day times 14, that's about almost $600. That seems like a reasonable guess. Other guesses, estimates? $100. For the whole time or per day?
For the whole time.
It's not a bad guess, actually. That was one of the least expensive countries I've ever traveled, actually, again, because of the exchange rate. In the end, from these $250, I came back with I had spent $180 at the very end before I flew back to the United States. So $180, so let's say about $200 is just...
Do I win something?
Good guess. So I went out in Tehran to grab a bite to eat and went to a really small local place, and a friendly local invited me to join him at his table and invited me to this small dinner, which was very nice. We had a good chat, and it turned out he spoke English reasonably well, and it turned out he's an engineer working on printing machines and was familiar with a German printing company. So it was nice. After a couple of days, I took the bus, and here's where the Bike Friday folding bike comes in. I not only have a suitcase on the plane, I also have a bag, a duffel bag that can hang over the shoulder, and I can just take that into a bus. No fuzz, no, oh, we don't take bicycles. It's just a piece of luggage, not even an extra fee. Sometimes they try to get an extra fee because, oh, what's in the bicycle, so we ought to charge you. But that's rare, and I typically fight it to the teeth. If somebody says, well, I want to charge you, it's like, well, this is a normal bag. It just doesn't matter what's in it, does it? So this was a bike ride from Tehran to the northwest, a city called Tabriz. which has a lot of history. And it took about, the whole day took about 10 hours. And the bus left 2 hours late, so it took a long time. It was 12 hours. I was sitting next to somebody in a seat, and he spoke English pretty well too. And I learned from him that the next day was a holiday, a big Muslim holiday where they would sacrifice sheep in Mecca. A very meaningful Muslim holiday, and I learned that through his translational app where he translated this into German for me. That was a man in his 50s. He was putting pieces together. I believe he was a physicist, highly educated. He had been in the United States. And it turned out that when I said, well, when we chatted about social media, he was very much against social media. And other pieces of the conversation kind of boiled down to he was a supporter of the regime. He also said, well, a lot of things that really made me conclude a supporter of the regime. And it turned out that was the only supporter of the regime I met on my trip. That's the reason I'm pointing it out. That was very rare. Typically, people taught me the opposite, and I'll expand on that. So I was somewhat, at times, somewhat uncomfortable, to be perfectly honest, that I have this fierce supporter of the regime next to me, but it went all right. Somebody, when I arrived in Tabriz, happened to have the same bicycle as I do, a Bike Friday. And I'm kidding. I arrived, put my bag together, and people were like, wow, what is this? And a friendly bystander asked me whether he could check it out, and I let him check out my bicycle. So that was nice. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them at any time. I'd like to make it interactive.
Yeah, so back at the hostel thing, a couple of things back, I noticed the wall had English print. Is that to say that there was a lot of English speaking at the hostel?
That's a good question. Who else was at the hostel? So I counted, there were people from I counted 16 different countries at the hostel. There were nobody from the United States. Restricted from the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, travel from these countries is highly restricted. It's not that people can't go, but they can't just show up as individual tourists. But other countries, I saw people from a lot of other countries, and to my great surprise, several solo traveling women. Young women were traveling by themselves, one from Italy, one from Poland, and one from Turkey, and they were at the end of their trips and said they had a great time. Small hotel in Tabriz where I spent one night. That was about $8. And they do have ATM machines. So that's the reason I took the photos. Like, well, they do have ATM machines, but as somebody from a foreign country, you are still unable to use your ATM card in Iran. This is a bakery, a local bakery. As you can see, people are in line and they make the bread in batches, and once they start selling, people get their bags, typically some flat bread, very tasty, directly out of the oven. And I took another bus to another city, that is Urmia, the next morning, and we're crossing you can see here a boat and a lake that's mostly salt. We're crossing a salt lake. Again, locals checking out my bicycle, and I'm getting a local wrap with potatoes, some greens, an egg and tomato. It was very tasty. It's my lunch. Finally, I'm on the road after enough taking a plane, enough being in the bus. I'm on the road. So I'm starting in the northwest, west of this salt lake, and riding south to a city called Kermanshah. And this is in a couple of provinces. The first is called Azerbaijan, West Azerbaijan, and mostly I was in Kurdistan, Iranian Kurdistan. So ethnically, this was not Persian. It was ethnically in Azerbaijan, that is ethnically Turkish, and their first language is a Turkish language, and in Kurdistan, people speak Kurdish. And Kurdistan is not a country, it's a region within Iran, a region within Iraq, a region in Turkey, and also a region in Syria. It's been an eternal struggle of the Kurdish people that they don't have a state. So I finally 1 o'clock p.m. I started to ride my bicycle in the city. There was quite a bit of traffic on the road, and it was very hot. It got like up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. It's like I was not too upbeat when I started this. I was like, I didn't have any place lined up where I would spend the night. So it's like, well, I have a tent with me, but it's like, I don't know where I'm going to spend the night. So I was not too upbeat, but I was on the road. And then a local stopped. This young fellow stopped, and we chatted. And it turned out he was driving this vehicle, and it turned out he was a veterinarian. And he was selling veterinary therapeutics to local vets. And so that resonated with me because my late father was a large animal veterinarian in Germany. So I said, oh, this is really interesting. It's a vet, and he was on his way to visit with his customers and sell drugs to be used in livestock. So he's opening up his truck. He's a very entrepreneurial guy. He just had gotten a new truck, and we had a chat. He even invited me to his house, but I felt like, no, I ought to get some miles ridden. I'm here for a bike tour, so I said, no, I can't. But then I felt like, wow, it's so hot, and I don't even know where to stay. It's like, what is this? And the road seemed like more like, initially it looked like a highway, so it's not like a nice country road. It's like, so I said, well, do you got space in your truck? So after 3 miles, I cheated. And it turned out he was actually heading to where I was planning on going anyway. So I said, well, can you give me a ride? And sure enough, he gave me a ride. So we had a really good conversation, early 30s, very entrepreneurial guy, veterinarian. And he was very frustrated with Iran and the current economic situation. For example, he pointed out with a currency like that so down, he'd be unable to travel to a foreign country, for example. He was living with his parents, and I mean, he was middle class, and he had his own business. He also owned another car, so he was not poor, but he was very, very unhappy about the situation in Iran. And when people ask me where you're from, I typically would say, whenever I travel, people know where you're from. It's like, well, I got 2 choices. Either I say Germany or I say United States. I got 2 passports, right? So in Iran, when people said, where are you from? I said, Germany. And people thought, wow, this is a great country. We love Germany. And however, when I further talked with people, like with this guy, I spent quite some time with him. It turned out I live in the United States, and I reside in the United States, so people understand that I may be a U.S. citizen. So he said he would give anything to live in the United States. He would, without hesitation, leave everything behind. So he took me to his customers. That was also pretty cool. We visited local vets, and he delivered animal therapeutics, and we even sat down inside and had chats. I didn't write a lot at all that afternoon, but hanging out with local people and just had a really good time. And they were like also very interested. And when they understood this isn't really a guy from Germany, this is a guy from the United States, initially I thought, well, I hope they don't call some local police or something. I mean, I was initially somewhat concerned that they would say, well, this guy came in here with a German passport, but this is a U.S. person. So I was a little concerned, but it turned out they were just thrilled. And they learned that I'm from the United States. So I thought that was really cool. I just had a really good time. Not everybody spoke English. And these in the middle, that is the senior veterinarian, the owner of the practice. And on the right and left are a couple of his 2 associates. They didn't speak English, but Masood is his name, Dr. Masood, the veterinarian, he spoke English very well. And it turned out he had learned English from watching English channels. So he trained himself, and I thought that was really cool. Somebody who trains themselves to speak English. So I spent like several hours hanging out with these guys, and people came in, farmers picking up stuff, even patients came in for treatment. Again, I grew up like my late father was a large animal veterinarian. We were dealing with farmers all the time like that, so I kind of felt like at home. So I was so fascinated. They sell Holstein Friesian semen there, and I got a friend who is in that business, and I sent it to him. It's like, wow, look what I saw, and I thought this was a U.S. semen company, and he said, no, this is a Canadian semen company. But nevertheless, I was very excited to see that. And then it turned out Iranian hospitality. He invited me to his house for dinner and stay with him and his family. Initially, I felt uneasy about accepting the invitation. I felt like, wow, I'm not sure. And it was like some back and forth. And at the same time, I was very curious. I thought, that would be so cool. I didn't have any hotel or anything lined up. So an alternative would have been to somewhere pitch my tent. But at some point, I said, I am very honored about the invitation and would love to accept it. And he said, we are very honored to have you as a guest. So at around 9 p.m., he gave me a ride with my folding bike in his trunk to his house. And it was wonderful. And what we're drinking here this is dinner. They ordered pizza. They got pizza delivered to their house. They apologized profusely for this and said, well, for not preparing dinner. And obviously, they didn't know that I would show up. So I said, well, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. In addition, something to point out here is what we are drinking. that is wine. And wine contains some alcohol. And alcohol is illegal in Iran. So how did he get wine? What do you guys think? Black market is a really good answer. I was offered vodka at some other place, and that was from the black market. And there are other ways also to get wine. Yeah, it's homemade. Yeah. So a lot of people make their own wine.
And is that illegal to make your own, or just to buy it?
I believe that is also illegal, but it's not. People, I mean, what I found is in their homes, people do things that are not like this. It's like, wow, what is this? You see that? These are dancing women without their hair covered. It's like, wow, how is that possible? Is this Iran or what? So it turns out satellite dishes are illegal, but pretty much everybody has a satellite dish on their home. So everybody gets all kinds of channels, including Western channels, and that's where Dr. Masood, my host, learned English. And so they got a great choice of different channels on TV. I was like, wow, this is crazy. Something I didn't expect. So it's not legal. My understanding is sometimes they crack down and then everybody takes down their satellite dishes for a few days and then they pop up again. So that is him and his wife and a high school daughter. He also has a son who is in medical school in Tabriz, and his dream is to do a residency at Johns Hopkins. Let's take a look at the house. It's a really nice house with nice furniture. They had a guest. I stayed in the son's room. He also had a friend over. He's like, wow, I got this visitor from America, and one of his friends was also a veterinarian, came over, and his English was very good, very well educated. We had a wonderful conversation, and I was just very touched by the hospitality and also how well people were educated and how good of a conversation we had. We talked about this U.S. sanctions, change in policy under Trump, and what they are telling me is the regime does not care, the people suffer. So they were unhappy about it, and they said, well, the regime doesn't give a damn. Though this is the house on the outside, it's the next morning. It's really nice, and there's another, they have two vehicles, one that he gave me a ride in, and this is the other vehicle, it's an SUV. So they're doing quite well. And also something in the house that I saw that I wanted to point out is there are two systems for the bathroom. So on the right-hand side is the traditional Iranian system, and on the left-hand side is the Western system that we are familiar with. So here I had a choice. In most other places I did not have a choice, so I went with the Iranian system. It's also important to carry toilet paper. That is probably the most important piece you should not forget when you travel in Iran. So finally I'm hitting the road with my bicycle after a wonderful stay with my hosts. A great dinner, conversation, breakfast. I just felt that was fantastic. So finally I'm on the road on my bicycle. And finally I'm in Kurdistan. I'm crossing the border. And here's in a small city in Kurdistan. And even though if I had not told you that I was in Kurdistan, you would be able to tell that I'm in Kurdistan based on what?
The letters.
Huh?
The letters.
That's a really good guess, the letters, but that is not it. That gave it away. Let's assume you only see this photo, and instantly you know this must be Kurdistan. Why? The puffy pants. These are the Kurdish pants. Yeah. It's like, well, it must be in Kurdistan. People are wearing these puffy pants. So that is a traditional kind of pant that people wear in Kurdistan up to today. And what I'm wearing is long pants, even though it's really hot, because that is expected from somebody. You're not supposed to wear shorts. On the right-hand side, I was able to get away with moving it up a little because the pants got into my chain, so nobody said anything about that. So I arrived in this small city of about 150,000 people, so I arrived around 1 p.m. It was day one, and when I do a bike, I try to ease in and not do a monster day on day one. It's just ease in, get the body used to it, check things out. So at 1 p.m., I wanted to stay in the city. So I rolled in, I finished my wrap. I still had some of that from the day before. I looked around, and after 5 minutes, the shop owner approached me. And for some reason or other, he asked me, "Are you from Germany?" In very broken English. He was like, "Are you Germany?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm from Germany." And then it turned out his son is a Germany fan who speaks German. So once he had found out I'm from Germany, he gets out his phone and calls his son and gives me the phone, and I'm chatting with his son in German on the phone. And he's like, "I'll be there in 5 minutes." And then he shows up, and we have a chat, and then he said, "Well, would you like to come to my house? I'd like to offer you lunch. And tonight, I'm invited to a garden party. I would like you to join if you're interested, and obviously you are welcome to stay at my house." And I was like, wow, this is just amazing. I just shown up in this town 5 minutes before. And I was like, and this time I didn't even hesitate. I said, "Thank you very much for the invitation. I feel honored, and this is great." So this is my host this time. He's an architect and living in a fairly spacious apartment in this small city. And as you see, he is a fan of Germany. And we talked German. And he had taught himself how to speak German. He had never been to Germany. He also
How was his language skill?
I was really good. I was very impressed. He was a great fan of German culture and also a fan of trucks, especially Daimler-Benz trucks. And his dream would be to design trucks for Daimler-Benz, and he had sent designs to them and applied for a job. Had not succeeded yet, but his dream is to actually live in Germany. So we had a good chat, and he has a wife and a young son, and he named his son, gave it a good German name, Hermann. So he really loves Germany and German culture.
Did he tell you where his love of Germany came from? Was it watching football, or?
He got some exposure to German culture. It was not really football. Just more like authors, architecture, art. I'm a fan of Bayern Munich soccer, and I thought, well, I want to chat about soccer, but then he didn't really respond to that one. So.
Did he know that you live in the U.S.?
Yeah, I did say I live in the United States, and for him it was kind of a letdown, actually. He was not a fan of the United States, not because he doesn't, I mean, it was like a cultural thing. He just loves German culture. So then in the evening, we drove out to this place for the garden party. It was not anybody there for a party. This is not really what I pictured this. It was just a 20-minute ride out of town. So I was like, wow, this is going to be interesting. And then eventually his friends showed up, and they were like about 10 people, and we had a good time. And there you see some vodka. Vodka was offered, and that was from the black market. It's apparently no problem at all to just call somebody and get it delivered. So, so let's take a look at the guys. They knew each other from school, so they do this every other weekend. On a Friday is like Sunday there, so this was the weekend there. So it was, they hang out at the cabin and have a good time. So the first guy to the right is a teacher. Then it's me. Then the next guy is a young entrepreneur who spends most of the time in Iraq. He is a company that builds tunnels. And apparently he's prospering, and the company is doing really well. And he was a very successful entrepreneur. Next guy owns an auto repair shop. Next guy is an engineer. Next guy works for the local government, and in addition has a shop where he sells shoes. And the next one is a college student, the son of one of these guys. Later on, they put some kebab on the grill. That was also very tasty. So this inside, somebody's playing a traditional local instrument, and some songs were sung as well. Those guys spoke English, but with each other they spoke Kurdish, a Kurdish tongue. All right, next day I'm riding my bicycle through another small city, about 150,000, and then I get pulled over by the police. For what? I needed to show my passport and my visa was just a printout. It was like a copy. It's like, wow, he wanted to see the original. I was like, I don't have an original. This is the original. This is what I got. But as we further talked, it turned out he got friendlier and friendlier, and at some point I concluded I got pulled over because the policemen were just curious. There was no bad intent or anything. It was just curious, and I felt so comfortable that I asked the other guy, the other policeman, whether he could take a photo of this guy and me. So it was, I think, the best pullover by a policeman in my life in Iran. So it was just...
You didn't go to dinner with him?
I was just so expecting a lunch invitation. It didn't go that far, but I was like, wow, that's just an awesome police pullover. And here is lunch. I had to pay for it by myself. I had a nice, delicious kebab, and what I'm drinking here is a local yogurt drink that I drank all the time. It's actually very delicious. I liked it a lot. And this is a photo of the kitchen, and they were very busy. It was just, and this was Friday, so it was like Sunday here. It was the holiday. So it was very busy people. It was kind of a kebab factory. I liked it a lot. It was very good. And then outside, I chatted with somebody. Somebody was there. And the guy we were chatting, and it was like not a whole lot, and he was very outspoken against the regime. He's like, wow, I was just very interesting that they share this with me on the street. And he used the F word to refer to the mullahs. It's like, wow. I was surprised to see that people voice their frustrations to some foreign guy on the street. It also turned out he had this Bayern Munich sticker on his phone that you see there. It's my home German soccer team, and I was like very excited about that. And it turned out to be he is not only a fan but also a member of an online fan community. So it was also something I learned. Obviously, everybody has a smartphone there, and Iranians also are very active in social media. And I'll have a couple of more examples for that. So more from the bike ride. It's a mountainous area. It's also very brown. It's summer. It's like second 2 weeks of August. So it's not a lot of vegetation. It turned out the best time to really visit would be April because everything is green and blooming. Overall, the scenery I felt like was a little too brown. I wish there had been a little bit more color. People on the street just stop, offer me water, and take selfies. It was just very, very welcoming all around. So this night, nobody invited me. It's like, what is this? Nobody stops and say, can I offer you my house for dinner? It's like, anyways, so I had my tent with me, a very light summer sleeping bag, and a thermarest mattress. And I felt so safe that I did not have any concerns to just leave the road and pitch my tent. So I spent the night just pitching my tent off the road. And it turned out somebody was working in the valley, and he came up, and he not only saw me, we interacted. He didn't speak English, he was a worker, but I didn't feel like, oh my God, somebody saw me and they might come back at night and rob me or kill me or anything like that. I was not concerned. But I do sleep a little lighter. There's some concern I would probably have anywhere in the world, just pitching my tent somewhere in the wild when camping. More scenery, mountainous, and here I stopped for a local dish, very delicious, freshly made. I really liked the place, and again, the local yogurt drink. Guess how much that cost? 50 cents. It's a good guess. The locals pay about 30 cents. Now I'm a foreigner. Guess how much I was charged? A Western foreigner. 30 cents. So in some countries you pay a premium. In some countries you pay a multiple. But I really like it when they charge you what they charge everybody else without hesitation, sometimes they charge a small premium, which is fine with me, but sometimes they just screw you over. But I never had a problem with that, so that was nice. Scenery. And here I'm in another town in Kurdistan. This is actually really close to the border with Iraq. I arrived at about 7:30 p.m. was a fairly long day. And I decided to make it to this city of about 150,000. And I got there, and then I was like, wow, there was a protest. There were protesters in Iran. I was like, wow, what is this? No clue what was going on, but people were very unhappy and on the street protesting. So it was a rally. So I then later learned this is what happened. Marivan is the city, and it turned out a local community leader who had been very active against the regime, also very active as an environmentalist, had died that day putting out a wildfire, something that he'd been done for many years. And people were suspecting he had been killed by the National Guards. And they just pretended he was killed by the fire. Because he had been putting out wildfires for decades. He was very experienced. So they say, oh, that this was the National Guards who just fired into the area where they knew he was. So people were just very unhappy. And you could just feel it on the street. All right. So I was in this town, and then it's like, okay, let's wait 5 minutes. Somebody's going to invite me to their home. I really like Iran. Again, it did not happen. Nobody invited me to their home. People were friendly and chatting with me, but nobody said, come to my house. So I was like, well, maybe I ought to look for a place to stay. So I got my travel guide out, the Lonely Planet, I looked for hotels. And then I also remembered I had reached out to people before this trip on a website called Couchsurfing. Has anybody heard of Couchsurfing? Oh yeah, quite a few, so that's good. So I touched base with people a couple of months before on Couchsurfing and said, well, I may come through Marivan and would like to meet up when I'm in town. And then when I was there, like at 8 p.m., I was like, well, I better get a place to stay. I sent a text message to somebody I'd reached out to before and said, hello, Sharush, this is Stefan from Couchsurfing. I just arrived in Marivan. So this is a text I sent. Kind of not sure whether I would hear back. And then 5 minutes later, the phone rang. This is Sharush. Jump into a cab and come to my place. So it turned out he owns and operates and runs 2 English language schools in Marivan. And I gave the phone to the cab driver, and he took me to the language school where they're just finishing up classes that night. And I was then, right then, invited to a class. The next day, I took a day off writing, so I spent more time with more classes. So I visited with a whole bunch of classes over the day, and I had really good conversations with people and learned why they were learning English. And also, again, the theme was, somebody said, everybody wants to leave Iran. People just seem very unhappy about how things are going there. So this is in an area where the reception was. I was sitting there just chatting with people, and I asked this young student the following question. I said, well, if not Iran, where would you like to live? What's your favorite country outside Iran? What did she say? What's your guess? United States of America, without hesitation. Again, the local people are just fans of the United States. Good conversation with a young female teacher about her daily life in Iran. Since she's a teacher, she really ought to cover her head and even her neck. And also what I learned is, since I'm talking about a bicycle tour, as a woman, she's not allowed to ride a bicycle. So that was shocking. Yeah. She's not allowed to ride a bicycle. So he's the operations manager, young guy in his, I guess, late 20s. And I learned that he's trained as a petroleum engineer, highly trained. And they got petroleum in Iran, obviously. But he didn't find good job prospects, which is why he was the operations manager in the school. And he also was friends with the owner of the school. So his plan is, his dream is to get a master's degree in petroleum engineering in Norway. It's also oil rich, so it's not a surprise. But Norway was where he wanted to go. And his brother actually said, I'll pay for it. I give you money. It turns out his brother is doing really well. And I learned about his brother and his business. He is a professional and runs a professional smuggling operation. Very successful. And this is very close. It's like less than 10 miles from the border with Iraq. And they're very busy moving goods illegally across that border. And the way it works is that, I heard this from two people, they actually carry the goods on bags across the border. And his brother is somebody who manages the operation. He's not a carrier himself. And it turned out it's in the family. His father also was in the smuggling business. And it's high risk, high reward. You can do really well. But his father got busted a couple of times, so it's very cyclical business too. I asked him, why did you not become a smuggler? It turned out that line of work didn't fully appeal to him, and he thought, again, it's just very risky and stressful. This is where I'm staying. Again, couch surfing. I'm staying at his family's place. This house belongs to his folks. Yep. So it's a huge house with 4 stories. So one story is he, his brother, and his parents, who are out of town. They were in the cabin for the summer. Another story is his other brother, the smuggler, who's married with a couple of kids. And a couple of other stories are, one was empty and the other one was rented out. I have a photo from the outside. So as you can see, there's not a whole lot of furniture in here. And it turns out in Kurdistan, people just sit on the floor. They eat on the floor, they sit on the floor. They are really on the floor, and they sleep on the floor. I slept on the floor, and he slept on the floor too. I didn't see any beds. It's just local custom. Just between us, I find it uncomfortable, and I'm glad we sit. We eat at a table, we sleep in a bed, we sit on our couches. If I have a piece of advice to folks there, just get more couches and sit more on it. I mean, it's not a whole lot. It's just a couple on the side of the room. There's no table here. So it's not a whole lot. So at the middle of the night, it's like, and it's like, well, I didn't know what was going on. And next day, I learned there was an earthquake there. 6.0, so it was significant. And it woke me up. Shaking, so I was like, wow, that was crazy. And this area is actually earthquake prone. In the year before, over 1,000 people had died in a major earthquake in that area. This is the house from the outside. Yeah, it's pretty big. So he took me to a place we just hang out. We went to a lunch place. There's a lake in town, and we had some great local made fish. It was just fantastic. He was sitting there and really had a good time chilling. It turned out the question was asked, are people going across the border, not just smuggling, but can they just cross the border? There were a lot of people from Iraq at this place having lunch. And I saw women without a veil. And I was like, wow, what is this? I asked my friends, like, how is this possible? This is Iran. It turned out these are women visiting from Iraq. They didn't have the veil. Because it's not, they don't have to do this in Iraq. And apparently they get away not wearing a veil when they cross the border for a day trip. And again, everybody's plugged in nowadays in this world. Everybody has smartphones. So I learned from my friend's cell phone that John McCain had died. So news spreads quickly, including from the United States, including to Iran these days. And that night, I spent another night with him in the same place, and he took me out to a local kebab stand that was just very unassuming, small, and it turned out that this is the best kebab in town. And he said this guy has a following in town, and he has several hundred people going there. And he said even women go there to get their kebab. And I was just impressed by not how good it tasted, but just how much pride and effort the owner had and put into this shack. I thought I saw a lot of greatness here where you wouldn't expect it. It just touched me, and I went on and on and on talking to my friends how great this was, that my friend and the owner said, let's do a promotional video. So for like 2 minutes, I went on and on and on with the owner on this video, and he would post it on his Instagram because he's very savvy in social media marketing. So I thought it was really cool. So somewhere in Iran, people can hear my testimonial about my favorite kebab stand in Iran. Next day, on my bike again, passing a small store, bought a couple of pieces to eat, and the local family who owns and runs the store were having breakfast. And an invitation to join was extended, and again, another great example of Iranian hospitality by just pretty much everybody I encountered. So that was very touching and impressive, including fairly simple folks. They also have kind of a carpet on the floor, so you have to take your shoes off. You always take your shoes off when you enter a house. And even when you go on the carpet, this is a piece of cardboard, but take your shoes off. So they showed me some photos. This is their father on a pilgrimage to Mecca. They're fans of Real Madrid. This is Messi. They love Messi. And they didn't speak English. I didn't speak the local language. So we communicated with the phone, and they invited me to lunch. Lunch is our home. It's like, wow, this is very impressive. But this was still in the morning, and I wanted to go on, so I didn't take them up on the invitation. So I was riding my bicycle. It got pretty hot, up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so it was hot. Mountainous. You see some cows under the tree in the shadow. So it's a nice, refreshing break from the heat and the climb. Nice colors overall. And here is like, I'm less than, it's about 3 miles from the border with Iraq. And that I thought was interesting. Initially I was concerned that there are like some rebellious activity in Iraq. And I mean, so overall it's a pretty unstable country. But in the end, it turned out the Kurdish part of Iraq is so safe that you can visit. And now I would like to visit the Kurdish part of Iraq because apparently it's really safe. Goes up the mountain. exhausting, so people take naps. And here's the pass. Finally, I'm at the pass, and there's a military checkpoint, a small base, 3 soldiers. Again, very cheerful, welcoming. One, they ask me whether I want water, so one of the 3 runs, gets me fresh water. And I actually drank the tap water without hesitation anywhere in the whole country. Tap water was good. And the other one is taking a photo of the 3rd one and me. It was all very cheerful. This is a mountain town that I really liked, a little greener. And what this town is known for is the roof of one house is the deck of the house above. So that's how they climb a narrow valley and take great use of that. It's an ancient village where people have lived for thousands of years. Here I'm actually renting a room from locals. There's a little tourism in this small village, actually. So I'm renting a room from locals for $6 a night, and these little helpers carry my panniers into my room. Looks similar with no furniture. I'm rolling out my sleeping bag and sleep on the ground. Next day it's going down the valley. It's always nicer to go down than up. So it's going down through some very small villages. This is a local bread where they were eating all of it. It's just this little, it's very thin, and they use it to wrap their food and eat it with their fingers. A couple of local fans I accumulated when I took a break. When I got my phone out to take a photo, the girls, you see a couple in the back, they ran, but the boys bravely posed. That was a very strenuous day because it just got so hot and went up again. So I got so exhausted in a small village, I felt like this is it for the day. I don't want to go any further. And then it was like less than 100 people, so it was a tiny village. And then there was a grocery store, a couple of people outside, and I asked for accommodation, like room, guest house, and they didn't really understand what I wanted. They said, no, you gotta go to the next city, and I was just too exhausted. It's like, I'm not going to go any further. So then I was like, there's no place, no hotel, and they didn't say, oh, you can stay in our house. They didn't say that either. So then I said, well, can I pitch my tent around here? They didn't really seem to understand, and then I drew this on a little piece of paper. Can I pitch my tent around here? I used my hands. And then it turned out, yep, they pointed me to a place, offered some cardboard, and this is where I pitched my tent for the night. It turned out very scenic, and it's on top of an unfinished house right in the center of this village. There was a bus stop, and the locals were hanging out. It was actually quite interesting. At night, it was so hot, I didn't sleep well because it was just too hot. But I still liked it. They offered me food. That was really nice. Some eggs and so forth. And this was from my tent, a house. And then at around 8 o'clock, these 2 Toyota trucks showed up. They got their phones out, and people were just somewhat tense and talked on the phone, and 15 minutes later, they went on. I'm quite sure this was smuggling operation. Yeah. They got stuff over the border and were waiting for next orders where to go, and quickly stopped and went on. It didn't seem like anybody was living in the house. This was just a stop for a smuggling operation. And then at 9 o'clock, it was about to go to bed, people came and brought me dinner. Isn't that touching? It's like, wow. I had 3 dinners. 3 people came and shared their food with me, with this stranger who's pitching a tent in the middle of the village. I thought it was just amazing. It tasted wonderful. I couldn't really finish everything when there was so much rice too. I just couldn't. So next day, again, further mountainous, up and down, another city, another invitation. That didn't take any long. I was sitting outside and eating some melon. It was melon season, very delicious. And then the older person chatted with me, and he said, well, Germany, my daughter lives in Germany. And then he left. And then he came back with his daughter who was visiting from Germany, who actually is getting a PhD in Germany. So we talked German, as well as he spoke English. He was a retired businessman. Very nice people, so they invited me for lunch, and it was very good, very, very nice place. Seemed like they were slightly better off, but it's just very hospitable. I loved it a lot. They showed me town. It took me to the best ice cream place in town. It was very delicious. And was very nice. And then I had reached out to somebody in this town on couch surfing. So I switched hosts. I had lunch with these people, and then I dinner and stayed with my couch surfing hosts in the same town. It turned out they were living around the corner. So they also operate a language school. So I visited with that school as well, and I chatted with the students there as well. He's driving a 30-year-old car that supposedly was made in the United Kingdom. It was literally falling apart. Cars are very expensive in Iran. Nevertheless, everybody seems to have a car. Families have multiple cars. So they do get around in cars quite a bit. And he's taking me to his in-laws for dinner. That was also very nice, very good dinner. And they eat on the floor, like in the kitchen. Some local specialties were served, and the young guy on the left is his brother-in-law. He's an engineer and can't find work. So he has to work as a taxi driver. They don't make a lot of money at all. So it was very frustrating. Very smart guy. And he was thinking about getting into Bitcoin mining. So he asked me about that. How does Bitcoin mining work? And I said, well, you got to exercise caution. Don't rush into this. And then the woman to the right in the back, she was in her mid-20s, a nurse. She was a daughter-in-law or a sister-in-law, and a nurse. Can't find a job. It's like, where in the world can a nurse not find a job? So young, well-educated people in Iran can't find jobs. So it's very, very frustrating. The mother on the left, she was getting very impatient with her son for not yet being married. And he's like, that's all she's talking about. Every day she's hammering on him. It's like, you ought to get married. I'm not married, and my advice was, take your time. Don't rush into this. You don't want to make a mistake with this. And then he took me to his own parents. So it was somewhat exhausting. I was just visiting with people all day, and this is his parents. And again, they were hanging out in the balconies, just kind of chilling. It was pretty cool. And then the next day, I met some travelers, backpackers on the street. We had a chat. Guess which country they were from? Good guesses? Iran. So they look pretty Western, don't they? It's like, wow. So I mean, people in Iran, very different than the mullah regime. They are very secular, very Western in their lifestyles. So this is an example of that. More cycling, and another small town. This is about 30,000 people. No place lined up, and I wasn't sure whether it would be a hotel. And I stopped, looked at the map, and within 3 minutes, a car stopped with two people in the car, rolling down the window, talking. They barely spoke any English, but in the end, it turned out they said, well, would you be interested in having dinner in a restaurant together and follow us? So I followed them on my bike, and then they stopped by the restaurant, and then they said, well, would you like to come to our house for dinner and stay with us? And here I was not quite certain. I was like, well, they don't speak any English. How is that going to pan out? They were very friendly, but again, it's like, I'm not so sure. They don't speak any English. How is that going to work out? But on the other hand, well, I don't think there's a hotel here, and I don't have a place to stay. So I took them up on the invitation. And this is my host next to the car. And this is his house. And he has 2 children. And that's where they invited me for dinner to stay, and he took me out on the town, showed me around, and what they also did is they're like, well, please, we would like to wash your clothes. Maybe a hint that I was smelly or something. And I don't have a lot of clothes on these trips, so they offered me some local pants. So the puffy pants, here you have them, really puffy. So took me around town, and there's some man-made cave in here. And he didn't speak any English. I don't speak the local language, so everything was through the phone. So it turned out this is an ancient area that was among the first on the planet that was settled by people not too far from the Fertile Crescent. So it's been settled by people who do agriculture for thousands of years. I'm very social media savvy, so I'm WhatsApp friends with him, also on Facebook friends. Dinner in the house, very delicious local food with wife and daughter. Daughter is a karate champion, very cool. Also a fan of Ronaldo from Barcelona. And he's just also not very happy. Life is so hard here. So he's just very frustrated with not only the economy, but the lack of freedom. And also, people are very frustrated. It's like Iran should be a wealthy country. We got oil. But it does not reach the people. It stays with the regime, and also is going through foreign countries where the regime supports military groups all over the region. So people are totally fed up. And he every year he is playing the green card lottery. His dream would be to live in the United States. To a degree where I said, well, it's a great country. I love living in the United States, but we have problems too. Somebody on this trip asked me, how much are you making? And I said, how much am I making? It's like, wow, this is what you're making in a month is more than I make in a year. And I also mentioned, well, I have a mortgage to pay. So it's not like, I mean, prices are higher here too. To some degree, people even not just adore the United States, they think it's like paradise. So I periodically reminded them, like, we have problems too. And in the winter, they get snow, so he showed me some photo on the TV. I thought it was interesting, it's mountainous. And this is from earthquakes. Every house has these gigantic cracks. Earthquakes. He was actually a local bicycle enthusiast, and when I left the next morning, he joined me for rides to out of town. You see these all over the country. Again, it's a mullah regime. To the right is Khomeini, and on the left is Khamenei, who's the currently dictator. That was already the end of my bike tour. I'm taking a bus back to Tehran. Again, my bike is in the back. And finishing up with a few photos from Tehran, heavy traffic, accident. So it's very tough to, even as a pedestrian, cross the street. It's like they don't stop. There are not too many traffic lights, really. It's just, how do I cross the street? So I developed the following technique that worked really well. I used humans as a shield. So I waited, and finally a local would show up and cross, and I would just walk with them, then facing the cars. And that was pretty effective because the locals, they have another sense. They got some artificial intelligence in their brains. They can really compute when the cars come. Whereas I would never by myself ever dare to cross because the cars are over. But like in a Frogger way, they just make it across. The currency had further dropped by another 10% during the time I was there, during 2 weeks. It was crazy. It seemed like in free fall. A visit of the former U.S. Embassy, where the Americans were kept as hostages for 144 days. This is from the outside, anti-American propaganda, and everybody has to wear, women have to wear a veil, but they cover the bare minimum, as you can see here. They just cover the bare minimum. Making friends with the local produce store owner, and the subway, very modern. I'm very impressed by that. The guy here, the older guy, turned out to be spoke English, had a PhD, and had spent time in Germany. I'm meeting up with some other couch surfing folks. I'm not staying with them, but I'm meeting up with them. They were highly trained PhD physicists, and they wanted to get out. They thought this may turn into another Venezuela, where things are getting really bad. They're like, we gotta get out of here. So their plan was to do postdocs in Canada. Ideally in the United States, but currently they thought they wouldn't be able to get into the US, so they were applying for postdocs in Canada. Here's their phone, and while Facebook is blocked, everybody is on Facebook. How do they do that? There are apps you can use. It's called VPN. Everybody has like 5 or so VPNs. Some are not working all the time, but they access the entire internet through VPNs. And I had a VPN there too. And then they called me a ride back to my hostel, and they have a local equivalent of Uber. So same as here, through an Uber-like ride-sharing app, I'm getting home. And taking a ride there is so inexpensive. It's like, it was a 45-minute ride. It cost less than $2. I kind of felt bad about it. It's just like, it was not good. So coming back to the United States, it was more difficult to re-enter the United States than getting into Iran. Because the guy, the officer said, where were you? And I said, well, I was in Iran. And he's like, wow! Did I hear that correctly? It really caught his attention. It was like, wow, what were you doing there? Do you know people in Iran? And he was typing. And then I was pulled out for a special interview, special inspection. So they put your passport into this orange case, so it's visible to everybody. It's in the case, and you ought to follow an orange line to a back office where I was another officer then interviewed me and about the trip, and I showed them my passport, and it happened to be that I'd also traveled to Cuba, so that caught his attention too. And for work, I was supposed to go to Pakistan in September, so I had a Pakistani visa in my passport. And so all kinds of questions were asked about my travel habits. And then he said, well, I had to make a phone call, so he disappeared for 10 minutes and then came back, and finally I was allowed to re-enter the country. That was Washington, actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How did I plan the route? Why did I ride there, not somewhere else? What I do when I do a tour like this, it's important to be on smaller roads, not a highway, because it's just not fun to ride on a highway. So I considered other routes and thought this would be a good route. I actually asked on internet forums for advice on good routes, including some on Reddit, on a Lonely Planet forum, on something that's called Warm Showers. And then there's crazyguyonabike.com. People do reports. And I found something about a couple of young guys cycled through Kurdistan. I saw the photos. It's like, wow, this looks really adventurous. That's where I want to go. I had some cold feet at some point, but in the end, it turned out really well. Other sources for our apps that give you free GPS. So those were my maps. You don't have to have really internet connections, just like GPS. And there's some really good ones out there. Other resources I used were, I read some really good books. If you are wondering about good books about Iran, I can recommend some. A German guy who wrote a book called Couchsurfing in Iran. It's now translated into English. I read that, and that was pretty cool to read. So I'm not the first person to couchsurf in Iran. Some documentaries that I watched too, including Anthony Bourdain, who has a couple of shows from Iran that I highly recommend. And also TripAdvisor asked some questions there. Initially I wanted to write in May, and it turned out to be Ramadan, and I was like, wow, is that a good time or not? And people advised, no, it's not a good time, because every eating place is closed. So that's the reason I went in August. Other resources, I had a VPN as well. That worked out really well, so I could access the entire internet. Couchsurfing, I'd reached out to people, I'd mentioned that. Pack list, I have 2 panniers that you can see in the front handlebar bag. That's all I have. I had a tent, a small sleeping bag, and a mattress, and some light summer clothes, so not a whole lot. Any specific questions about what I brought? I don't really weigh what I carry. I make sure that the suitcase is less than 50 pounds. I weigh that, but that's all I know.
Was there any cultural expectation for all these hosts that you stayed with to get them something, or like buy them another meal or anything like that, or were they just like, hey, join us?
That's a really good question. It's like, well, they offer this for free. Maybe they're expecting something in return. Maybe they want me to help them to come to the United States or something. And I've had that, for example, in other countries where people like don't really freely offer something. They just want something. But here it seemed like it's just really part of a deep culture of hospitality. And it's also, I mean, people are very Western in their lifestyles, but they're, because of the regime, cut off from the West. So they're naturally excited when there's some Westerner they can talk to, invite to their house, and so forth. So I think it's a lot of curiosity as well. And also, they want to show that Iran is not all the mullah regime. It's like the message here is we people are good people. Don't forget that.
Talk, about their,
Yeah, people were on the street using the F word, referring.
afraid because, you go to
No, they're not. That surprised me. And in their homes, they were very open about their frustrations. Again, there was one guy who was sitting next to the bus for about 10 hours, and he was a pro-regime supporter. That was the only one. Yep.
Did any of the homes you stayed in have air conditioning?
I believe they did. I don't really pay attention to it. It never felt like hot in the houses. Okay. Yep.
Were the people as willing to be photographed as your photos look like?
Yeah, they were. Except for the guy from the regime, or this regime supporter. I was like, well, can I take a photo of the two of us? And he's like, no, I don't want this, no photo. Yeah. Surprisingly, yeah. Good observation.
Are you keeping in touch with all of them?
I've exchanged messages with pretty much all of them, and the person who I stayed with last, Hamid, who put me into these puffy pants, he regularly sends me a message. Recently, he was hiking in the mountains. He's sent me a couple of images.
They're not afraid of doing that?
Apparently not. Mm-mm.
On the subway train, is it gender separate? I mean, like, because your picture was all men.
It is.
Women on another
Yeah,
car?
it is. Yep, good catch.
Are they on another car? Or,
Yep.
and are they designated that way? So, like, if I was a visitor, I would know.
As a visitor, you'll find out. I mean,
I wondered that same question with the classes. The photos of the English schools seem to be all women.
there were some mixed classes. Good question. There were some mixed classes. It was not all separated. But in the bus, initially in the bus, I was sitting on the right-hand side of the aisle on a single seat. And on the other side, there were two seats next to each other, so I was sitting in a single seat. And then I was asked whether I could change so a woman could sit there so she wouldn't have to sit next to a guy. And then I sat next to the guy. So overall, it's one of the best trips of my life because of the people and the amazing hospitality. It seemed heartfelt. I didn't feel like there's an expectation of an exchange or something in return, which is amazing. People were just phenomenal. Phenomenal hospitality. I believe it's a combination of deeply ingrained in their culture, and also they're pretty Western people. I didn't see guys on the street in traditional Muslim clothes, except for very few clerics, maybe one or two in 2 weeks. So I'm concerned about the country and its future under the regime, and given that that young people who are well educated don't have jobs. It's not good. So thank you very much for coming.
This program was recorded on May 9th, 2019 at the Ann Arbor District Library.